All right. Our first questions via email. First one comes from Pavol to discuss the stock research tool on PowerOptions. Pavel's question is, before I enter a trade, I use a default search criteria, but I also do the stock research and PowerOptions to do a little bit of analysis. However, the screen is quite overwhelming. Are there other data on the stock research page that are good to take into consideration alongside the default search criteria before entering a trade? Can you please go over that data, give a brief explanation of some of the less common ones, and share what are the most important ones to look at before entering a bullish or bearish trade? The stock research tool can be accessed a few ways on PowerOptions. When you're in the search tool, for example, you'll see the more information button. You can open that. You'll see research and then link to stock research, or the long or short option or option research for the spread as well. On the top bar of PowerOptions, you can just put in your stock symbol and then click on quotes. And if you're on a stock chain, you'll see the stock title up at the top. If you're on the option chain, excuse me, you'll see the stock symbol up at the top with another floating more information button there, and that will give you access to the stock research tool. Now, the stock research tool shows all of the data that we have available on PowerOptions. Everything from percent short interest, broker recommendations, number of days up, number of days above the SMA 20, earnings per share growth, next earnings, next dividend, put and call volume ratios, volatility, and so on and so forth. Volume for the stock, market cap, for example, the days short interest. I typically don't use that, but it's available. The total range today, the last trade time for the stock, industry, the Z-score, Z-prime, and Springgate. These are bankruptcy factors. Here's your Bollinger Band information and held by institution. Got all your MACD information here. As I mentioned, the earnings and dividend, beta and RSI, percent and year range, and then the earnings per share growth, price to book, price to sales ratios, and price to earnings ratios. It's overwhelming, and that's not even all the information. That's just the, there's some more there, but it didn't fit on the screen. So it's best to take a look at this on PowerOptions. So what we're going to do here is change our screen. We're going to go to the OKTA stock research page for Pavol. So let's go ahead and navigate over there. There we go. So Pavol ran a search. Okta came up on one of the top results. He linked to the stock research page. Now, depending on strategy and depending on goals, you had mentioned bullish or bearish techniques. If I'm looking at a bull put credit spread, Pavol, things that I would look for are usually already set in the search to begin with. I'm looking for a specific MACD. I want a positive MACD there. I usually want it to be positive above the divergence line. And I want the stock to be trading above the SMA 20. Right now, OKTA is doing that as it is. I may look for a positive earnings per share growth. You'll see that in more common, I wouldn't say more common strategies, but you'll see that in other default searches for stock ownership. Things such as covered calls, naked puts, cash secured puts, usually calendar spreads as well, and married put positions. We want to see a positive management, a strong management for the company to see positive growth in earnings. So some of those will already have that in there as well. I don't really mind the percent of 52-week range for things such as bull put credit spreads. Some of the investors that use PowerOptions tell me from time to time when they run a search for bull put credit spreads, they see stocks that are hitting a new high and they're worried that it's going to pull back. Well, that's why we've tested those criteria, because we usually see that if it does pull back, it doesn't reach the level that we're looking at for the 10 to 14-day trade. That being said, if I'm doing something a little bit more risky in a bullish or bearish position, I may want to pay more attention to that. If I'm doing a naked put or a covered call, I might not want to be at the top of the 52-week range. Then again, I might be, depending on what the market's doing. Remember, the current high is only the current high until a new high is potentially hit. Of course, it could hit a new low. It's absolutely right. So I also don't get into the current option volume percentages. That being said, if your strategy to buy calls, bullish or bearish, or buy put, I should say buy calls for bullish, buy puts for bearish, Pavol. A popular approach is to look for options that are showing extended current option volume compared to their higher option volume today compared to their 90-day average. So that might be something that you can look for as well. This picked up today. I'd have to go back and look at the screenshot. Oh, it's right there in front of me. Okay, oh yeah, this was the one. It's about the same though. You see that there's not many put contracts to call contracts on this particular one, and our put call volume ratio is at 0.6. Some investors might use that as an indicator that the market feels it is more bullish with more calls than puts, or that it might revert back to normal and the puts might start increasing, indicating a bearish trend. It depends on who you talk to in that case. All right. So what are the first things, Pavol, I'd look for on this page? Normally, if I'm entering from, let's say, the bull put credit spread screen, as I mentioned, I already know I'm above this where I want to be. I already know down below that my MACDs are where I want them to be because that's already in the search itself. I know I'm not going to be bothered by this, the earnings date. Why? Because specifically on that search, I'm removing any stocks that have earnings between now and expiration. We don't want that with a credit spread. I might want that with a long straddle or a long strangle, for example, or a different strategy. I probably wanted to see if there's positive earnings per share growth. In that structure, I'm not too overly worried about the average stock volume or the market cap. And the reason why is because I'm so familiar with that search that most of the positions that come up in that search table, specifically bull puts, I know what they are already. I mean, you know what the companies are. Most of them are high volume stocks, close to, if not above, 1 million shares average trading volume per day, with at least upper mid to high market cap size positions. But it's always nice to know if you come across a stock you don't know anything about it, you don't know what sector or industry that it's in, then it's always a good idea to make sure you're checking the volume or the market cap as well. What you may be more interested in is some of the other information. Now, I'm not glossing over these things such as the put-call volume ratio, the put-call open interest ratio. I just typically don't use those. If you do use those, they're here for you. I don't pay too much attention to the SMA 50, SMA 100, or SMA 200 or 250, but if you use those, you can see those here as well. One thing that I do like to look at, of course, is down here. Not so much the total number of brokers that are recommending a buy, a strong buy, or a hold recommendation, Pavol. What I'm looking for in a bullish position, I like to see this number, a negative change, which means that last week, the broker recommendation is at 1.5. This week, it dropped down to 1.39. So it's going closer to 1. It's going closer to a strong buy, and that's important. Now you can see the earnings from last quarter, this quarter, and the projections here down there as well. That might be important to you if you're doing a married put, a covered call that you're planning on staying in for a few months or at least through one whole quarter. Calendar spread, for example, that you buy the call that's 6 months out or so. You might want to make sure you're seeing positive earnings. If you're doing a bearish strategy of that nature, a covered put, for example, a married call, a calendar put position, you might want to see some negative information here as well. Being on the recommended lists or doesn't really matter. You know, we have those lists in the search where you can screen specifically against IBD 50, CanSlim, Pavol, and things of that nature. NASDAQ 100, S&P 100, S&P 500, value line lists. So if it's in one of those lists, it'll show up here. Naturally, if I see a stock that is in, let's say, the NASDAQ top 100, is in the IBD 50 and CanSlim, and is in the value line list, that means that a lot of companies really like that stock. That's something positive in that case, I believe. But oftentimes I'm not really looking at that, depending again on the strategy I'm doing. I might want to see something that's, in a higher recommended list for those longer term bullish plays. Okay, married puts, maybe calendar spreads, or if you're planning on doing a covered call or just constantly selling a naked put against a position. What are you just looking for there? You're looking for confidence in a sense. Now down here you have some other links, just quick link to the company profile, which you could also access from the search through that more information button. Optionable stocks and industries if you want to use comparison. Opinion indicators, this takes you right to bar chart. I typically don't like to go there because I don't usually have Chrome here and I don't have the ad blocker on, and there's a lot of ads that pop up on that page as well. The income statement and the analyst estimates, which takes you to Zacks. Now, I wanted to show you something here. This leads to some confusion. I want to clear that up. The broker recommendation that's shown on the searches, and you can have shown in the columns, is based on the Zacks data that we get. We get Zacks data for some of these issues, earnings, I believe, and the average recommendation. So someone will come, a new user will come down here and see that, okay, you've got an average recommendation of 1.39. They hovered over the pop-up and they saw it's based on Zacks data. They go to analyst estimates, it goes to the Zacks page, and this says 2, not 1.39. Sometimes it'll say you'll have a 1.5 broker recommendation number there, and this will be down here in the red, showing sell. And they'll say, Zacks says it's this, but your site says it's this. These are two different things. This is an independent Zacks rank that they use. It's a short-term rating system. It's not the same as the exchange broker recommendation number, the number of brokers recommending the stock. It's different. Okay, so that's the Zacks rank. This is the broker recommendation. That's why they're subtly different in this case. Okay. All right. So what would I typically look for? Again, I've already told you most of the information. Bullish positions. Yeah, I do want to see some good volume if I don't know the stock. I'd like it to be mid to large cap stock. I'm not too concerned personally with range. This is just me. I don't really use the bankruptcy indicators anymore. Bollinger Bands, I'll look at that on the profit and loss chart rather than the hard numbers, and usually the MACD as well. But for certain strategies, I know the MACD is already where I want it to be. I know the Bollinger Bands are already where I want it to be because they're in the search results themselves. When you are opening a new position, naturally, it is important to know when the next earnings are. It's important to know if a dividend is coming up, depending on which strategy you're doing or deciding between a strategy. If I'm looking at an out-of-the-money naked put and I'm comparing it to the parity in-the-money covered call, and then I see that there's a dividend coming up between now and either expiration that I was planning on using for those two parity trades, I might go with the covered call. If I get assigned early, hey, I take the money and go that route rather than the out-of-the-money naked put. Not really a deciding factor, though, but it could help you lean one direction or the other, depending on what you're looking to do. I do want to see positive earnings in those cases. I do want to see stocks that are above their 20-day SMA, and I want to see relative volatility. But again, Pavol, most of the securities that I'm looking for in a given strategy, I know that they're already in a volatility range, 20-day or 50-day, and I'm above the SMA 20 based on the criteria that is set in that search. If I'm looking for bearish positions, well, lower volume doesn't necessarily mean bearish. When you're hunting for bearish positions, you'd say, hey, Apple's hit a new high, and I think it's going to pull back over the next 15, 20, or 30 days, so I'll look for that as well. So that's not really a factor there, but I would want to see a negative earnings per share growth. I would want to see stocks below the 20-day and 50-day moving average for a bearish trade potentially. And I wouldn't want it to be riding the lower Bollinger Band, but again, I'm going to see that based on the graph, the chart of the stock itself, rather than looking at the numbers to analyze MACD and the Bollinger Bands in that case as well. So bearish, yeah, poor earnings, want to see it in the downtrend, as I mentioned. And yeah, I might look at the RSI too. I might not want the RSI to be too low. There's that rule, if the RSI falls below 30 or below 25, it usually bounces off of that. So if I'm doing a bearish position, everything looks good that I want to see, but the RSI is at 27 or 26 or maybe 22, I might hesitate on that a little bit. But if I'm doing a bear call spread that's deep enough out of the money, well, in that case, then yeah, I might go ahead and just take that chance as well because it is matching everything else that I want. So in a nutshell, Pavol, that is your research tool. That is what I would look for in those cases. Now, I went through a lot of data, but I also said I know that when I'm doing a preferred search, that most of this is already met. And Okta is no longer on this one. Okta was where I got that from. Was I ran a bull put search today when I was putting these slides together for Pavol, and Okta was at the top of the list. It's now off of the list. Whether it dropped a little bit towards the end of the day or something else happened. But you see here, what have I set? I've set the stock to be above the SMA 20, and I've set the positive MACD signal. So I know it's already where I want it to be. And as always, you can select to view any of the columns that you want. So Pavol, once you nail down what's most important to you of what you want to see, whether it's the average stock volume, the market cap, earnings per share growth, as I had mentioned, if you wanted to see that, or any of the stock data, or any of the option data, you're just going to add that in to your column view, customize your columns the way that you want here on your search, and then it'll be set for you so you can see the average stock volume measured in millions, and measured in thousands, and the market cap, which is measured in millions as well. So that's all there for you. If there are 5 or 6 important factors that you like to see right away, Pavol, that you don't see on a chart, if it's available in the search here and it's on the page, the research page, it's probably available as a column to see.